Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yes. Yes. It's been a beautiful time here. You know, I didn't know what to expect. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I do work in the university. I'm a professor of Pan-African Studies and Sociology. I'm a playwright. I do work within the theater, and also a founding member of Black Lives Matter, which started almost 6 years ago now. But before I get deeply into my work and kind of giving some context, because I've been listening really intently to what's been happening over the last few days and wondering whether or not I can offer a worthwhile contribution to our dialogue and maybe even help to, fill in some holes. I think that the presentations thus far have been brilliant, and I want to give a quick clap to everybody in the room for their contributions. So when Patty reached out to me, Patty had been following my work. Thank you, Patty, for all of your support in my work. Patty is also an advocate for racial justice, for social justice, for gender justice. And he had been following my work, and he said that, for the most part, he felt like some of my philosophies were aligned with the Baha'i principles, if I can say that relatively generally. And so he felt like it would be great for me to contribute to this space, and so I agreed to come. And so what I understand is that as it pertains to the narrative or the conversation that we're having this weekend is about reconciliation, about repairing or reparation, and unifying. And that is very difficult in a very divided, fragmented world to do that. So the kind of natural assumption is that we're going to lean into language that is unifying. We are one. We are connected. We come from the same living, breathing organism. We are all the same living, breathing organism. But how is it that we can really make that real in a world that is intent on compartmentalization and division? Does this make sense, what I'm saying? And so I want to talk about the possibility that maybe even the language that we use furthers the division rather than even when we don't intend to. That might be a possibility. But before I actually get into the details of that, reparation, reconciliation, and unification, I want to tell you a story if it's okay. So in summer of 2013, I had graduated from undergrad, and I had studied well, and my family was proud of me, and we did a graduation party for me in Northern California, where I'm from. And so all of my social justice activist friends came from Los Angeles up to Northern California to come celebrate with me, as well as my other friends and what have you, family, all of the rest. So we're celebrating, and my family, my mom specifically, realizes that a few of my friends are in the corner of the party looking irritated for some reason at my lovely party, right? And she's just like, my mom is a lovely Nigerian woman. She was like, what is the problem? My dear, are you okay? And so, my mom loves my friends. My friends love my mom. And she obviously sees something is energetically wrong. And they say, Miss Remy, George Zimmerman has just been acquitted. Now, if you all don't know, our dear brother Hawk, mentioned that George Zimmerman was the person who killed Trayvon Martin. And so this was in 2012? This was in 2012. It wasn't until 2013 that he actually was acquitted. Now, when the Trayvon Martin case happened, people in the States knew about it. This traveled internationally. You all knew about it as well. And so what happened was, my mom responded to them when they said, George Zimmerman has just been acquitted. And my mom said, oh my God, that is just horrible. Please don't tell Funmilola. Right. And she said that because she didn't want them to ruin my party, because my mom knows me. And my mom knows, okay, I'm gonna leave the party right now, take my dress off, and we've gotta go. Right. And so she said, just wait, just tell her later. And so they didn't tell me, and I frolicked through my party smiling. And then the next morning, my my friends pulled me aside and they knew that this case was very important because we, like so many of us, actually did believe like that this was going to be one of the instances where this man was going to be held accountable, you know? We were holding on to some hope to that. And he didn't get held accountable. He was acquitted. So that morning, my friends told me, and we immediately packed our bags and drove down to Southern California, where we were based, because that's where we did our studies, and immediately started to organize with a contingent of Los Angeles organizers, activists, artists, those who are engaged in the work to transform societies for the better. And about, I want to say, a few dozen of us met up in mid-city Los Angeles at St. Elmo Village and organized what we called Justice for Trayvon Martin, Los Angeles, which was the initial contingent that became Black Lives Matter. So we organized a rally and a protest. We took it over to Rodeo Drive, which was a community that would not understand a lot of the things that we were talking about. Y'all know Rodeo Drive is very fancy, right? And Rodeo Drive is not familiar with the hyper-policing and over-incarceration of their communities, and oftentimes unfamiliar with the language that we use to describe racial injustice as a structural issue. A lot of people still really believe that racism is just like this conversation about an individual being mean to an individual, right? Like, the conversation about racism is a conversation about the way in which there is racialized language, racialized behaviors that are ingrained into our systems, institutions that help to perpetuate over generation inequality, right? Not somebody just being mean to somebody else. That's interpersonal, and we're talking about structural, something bigger. So we wanted to bring the conversation over to a community that would not maybe understand. And we did that, and that was the birth of Black Lives Matter in essence. Patrisse Cullors was with us. To keep a long story short, Patrisse Cullors is one of the women who is identified as being one of the 3 co-founders of Black Lives Matter. She was there with us as an artist organizer in the community, along with myself, along with Melina Abdullah, along with a number of other people that were invested in making something happen. Because what was happening was that people were starting to become so deeply desensitized that online, after George Zimmerman was acquitted, a whole bunch of people essentially got online and said, you know, what do you all expect? Like, come on, this is America. Did you expect justice? And Alicia Garza, another one of the women who is identified as one of the 3 co-founders, wrote, in essence, a love letter to Black people and said, you all, I understand how easy it is for us to just say that this is just how it is and that this is the system, but that we cannot allow ourselves to be desensitized in this way to the extent that we no longer even feel compelled to resist when these things take place because we accept it as just being what it is. And she signed the and it was on Facebook, and she put this status up and she signed it at the end and she said, Black Lives Matter. And this is, you know, in the summer of 2013. And my close friend, Patrisse Cullors, comments underneath that Facebook post, and she puts a hashtag in front of Black Lives Matter. And then Opal, one of the other 3 co-founders, comments underneath it and says, hey, this is something. Like, we should leverage this energy around the conversation about anti-Black racism in the States and the different iterations of that, because there are many different iterations, which I will get into, that are not just police brutality, but that is one iteration that we have placed our attention on. Does this make sense where I'm going with this? Okay. So we organize a contingent of people. It's just maybe like 24, 25 of us, and we call ourselves Justice for Trayvon Martin Los Angeles. We organized this rally, and it eventually became what we know to be today as Black Lives Matter. 2 years later, Mike Brown happened, and before we knew it, people were all on social media, online, hashtagging Black Lives Matter, and we were just like, what's happening? We didn't know. We knew that we went in with the intention to do something impactful. We didn't know that it was going to become a modern rallying cry against anti-Black racism, okay? And so, in essence, as I move through this work as somebody who is deeply invested in human wellness, deeply invested in humans understanding the oneness of us, which is so deeply ingrained in the Baha'i faith and principles. I am also aware that we cannot have any true and honest conversation about the oneness of humanity if we are unwilling to look at the structures, institutions, ideologies, and behaviors that make it so that we do not have equal access to opportunity. Does this make sense? Equal access to opportunity. It doesn't always mean equal access, equal outcome, but at least that everybody has equal access to opportunity. So I'm moving through the world, doing my work, doing my studies, doing my teaching, and I'm within the movement for Black Lives. And I notice some of you were at the creative night last night, where I did my poem, Woke Black Folk, where I performed 4 different characters, okay? And those 4 people were birthed from me observing the different personalities that exist within the movement for Black Lives in the States. And what I felt, because somebody asked me, well, what was your artistic process? And I said that I write about what I feel is needed. I create art about what I feel is needed, because you can present data and stats and facts and logic to people, and sometimes they're like, oh, that's convincing. But maybe they don't feel moved to action. Oftentimes, in order to get people to feel moved to action, you have to appeal to their logic, right, that side of their brain, and you have to appeal with narrative and real lived experience, right, that to the kind of what one would argue the emotional, or as maybe the Baha'i faith would call the spiritual side of a person, in order to get a person to feel moved to action. That it's not one or the other, but oftentimes it's a combination of both. And oftentimes art serves the purpose of getting people to move, to feel, and not to only just think, but to feel and to think work in tandem with each other. So I write this poem, Woke Black Folk, and I talk about all of the different ways in which there are different ideologies that exist, but they are common goals. They seek the same goal, but that they have different ways of attaining said goal, which is freedom and equality for Black people, which is justice for Black people. And once we get to a point where we can clearly and pointedly say that Black lives matter, then we can come to a point where all lives can actually matter, right? And I'm gonna get into the details of that in a moment. But I mean, this is just a small graphic here that shows me dressed up as the various different characters. The play is called The Intersection Woke Black Folk. I won't be focusing on my play for the entirety of this presentation, but I did want to mention it briefly because it does inform so much of why I do the work that I do, which is to connect communities that don't see each other, can't hear each other, are usually not in the same room, and oftentimes don't like each other. Make sense what I'm saying? And so especially for the people that were at the creative night last night, then you're definitely with me. And so some notes here from some people that I respect deeply that saw my work. Angela Davis, are we familiar with who Angela Davis is? Social justice scholar, intellect, brilliant author, writer, one of the, I would say, one of the most kind of significant intellects of our time, if you really dive into her work. And she said that it was timely, brilliant, and necessary. So of course, when Angela Davis tells you that your work is timely, brilliant, and necessary, you just like, so you can just go, you don't have to do anything else with the rest of your life. I'm done. Erykah Badu saying that this is Baduism, meaning this is her work as well. Robin D.G. Kelley, a world-renowned historian, saying that it was stunning. And so after that, I was just like, I've done enough in my life. I don't have to do anything else. I'm Nigerian. If you don't, I'm Nigerian. And so I am really not even necessarily here to talk about Black Lives Matter, which I will, but I want to take it a little bit more. I think that my peers in the movement and the struggle, Tiffany and Hawk, really broke down what BLM is about. And I want to add on to the conversation, if I can, about why. Like, why does the fragmentation of race exist? And why do we have to always have all of these difficult conversations about all of these divisive things, race, gender, class, it's heavy, it's a lot. Why does this fragmentation exist? Why? Like, where did it come from? And most of the people in this room would likely identify it as an economic source, meaning that race started as an economic drive, meaning that there was no distinction between white and black prior to there being a kind of, how you can say, intention to distinguish, and I'll be clear about this, Europeans from Africans. So if you go and you travel into Africa and you say, there's a lot of things here that I need, mineral resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the only way to be able to actually get those things without engaging in some type of trade or some type of camaraderie where you're just simply exchanging goods is to justify being able to take. You still with me? And in order to justify being able to take, you have to create that the people there are different or somehow less than. So, oh, I'm white, you're black, for lack of a better term, even though those were not the terms that were used at that point. So long story short, there's an economic incentive behind this original division. And then at some point, the other quote unquote races fell in between this white-black binary. But aside from that, if we're looking at the kind of economic origin, why else maybe does this fragmentation of race exist, aside from economics, aside from money, aside from greed? And I want us to think about this together if we can. I was thinking this through on my way here, and keep me on track on time. I can be so extremely long-winded, and I have so much to get through, but we're gonna get through it together. So why does prejudice exist? It's not an easy question, but there are layers to it, and I want us to think about the possibility that the language that we use maybe actually perpetuates prejudice. Can we think about it together? Okay, I'm gonna read this. How is, because we're talking about repair, reconcile, and unify. This is the theme. Now, how is reparation, reconciliation, and unification possible when we have been trained to compartmentalize and divide in order to understand our physical world? From childhood, we are taught by the adults around us. These adults use language to communicate. Language is powerful and expansive because it allows us to share ideas. Language is a beautiful thing. But language is also very limiting because it is a reflection of our physical experience, our physical reality, which is informed by duality. Now, those of the Baha'i faith understand that there is physical reality, there is mental, there is spiritual, yes? And so if your language is an actual reflection of you trying to make sense of the physical world, that means that your language is going to be relatively limited. Still with me? Okay. So, the physical world is informed by duality. We understand this because we compare it to that, okay? Black, white, male, female, up, down, left, right. That neither of these things exist without the alternative. Does this make sense? Okay. We understand this because we compare it to that. Understanding one thing by comparing it to another. Up versus down, like I've mentioned, left versus right, man versus woman, black versus white. And in this comparison, our minds come to view the two things on both sides of the duality as opposites. We don't just view them as different, we actually subconsciously view them as opposite. Make sense where I'm going? Okay. Instead of simply viewing them as different. Our silent and subconscious assumption is that these things are opposite. And this is not necessarily by our nature. We're not naturally going to view the thing that is different as opposite to us, but we live in a particular society that helps to fuel that assumption. Under a system that is plagued by unmeritocratic hierarchy, difference is understood in hierarchical and oppositional terms. Now, I've said a lot of words here. Yeah. Yes, I have. I'm gonna break it down. Under a system that is plagued by unmeritocratic hierarchy. Now, meritocracy means that there is no bias in the system, that you get to advance based off of your merit and your work ethic, period. Your race, gender, class does not matter. If you work hard, you can make it, you can evolve. Now, if we live in a system that is actually unmeritocratic, we understand that work ethic matters, but we also understand that what you have access to as a child has a great deal of influence on whether or not you are going to succeed in your life. Still with me? So we actually live in an unmeritocratic society as much as folks would like to believe that we live in a pure meritocracy. Make sense? Okay, so if we're living in a system that is plagued by unmeritocratic hierarchy, meaning a lot of the people that are what we would perceive of at the top are not necessarily there because of their own hard work ethic and drive. Of course, an example of this, and Donald Trump's name has been brought up in this space a number of times. He's a type of person that believes that the reason that he's at where he's at is just because he works really hard. That $1 million loan that his dad gave him when he was a young man didn't have much to do with it. You understand? That $1 million loan was just a small loan. You understand? Now, of course, you can do a lot when you have resources that are actually not allocated to other groups disproportionately in your society. But it's easy to say, I worked hard, I deserve this, I studied hard, stop complaining, stop whining about the system. I did what I had to do to succeed, right? You all know these people, you understand. Now, an unmeritocratic hierarchy, difference is understood in hierarchical and oppositional terms, meaning we understand difference as that is opposite from that. This is not just different from that, it is either better or worse. So what would it be if we stopped saying, oh, I don't see difference, I just love everyone? And what would it be if we actually acknowledged the difference in each other, but did not attach a hierarchy to it? What would it be if we stopped saying, oh, no, stop bringing up, we're the same, stop it, right? With that kind of, that assessment that is void of any real structural analysis, but instead saying, yeah, we have different experiences. Fundamentally, we are the same, but we have different experiences. Now, I will honor the truth of your reality by acknowledging the fact that you may suffer from particular vulnerabilities that I do not suffer from. Do you understand? There are some vulnerabilities that other communities have that I don't even have as a Black woman. And there are some vulnerabilities that I experience that some of my peers would never understand. Some of my peers would never understand some of the things and the assumptions that people have made about me because I'm a Black woman before I've even opened my mouth. And then when I open my mouth and I happen to be smart, then they're just like, whoa, you're smart. You understand, right? Like the way in which stereotypes work in this society. And that's just one small example. Okay. This is not just different from that, it is better or worse. Duality does exist. We understand that duality does exist. But what happens when we have language serve the purpose of maintaining hierarchical dualities? This versus that, Black versus white, man versus woman, instead of they're equal and different. They're just different. So what happens, oh, this is my question. What happens when we have language that serves the purpose of maintaining these dualities? It always ends up in the same thing, us versus them. And you all see, and part of what you engage in this work is trying to break down all of these unnecessary binaries that exist of the combating teams. And if we continue to use language that is kind of ideologically and subconsciously divisive, instead of just looking ourselves as different, then we're always going to have a us versus them mentality. Now, we all know who Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is. A lot of us have misinformation about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s work and legacy, actually. Martin Luther King Jr. was advocating for what one would say is a nonviolent resistance. It was not passive. It was very active. During the time of his work in the United States, 65% of Americans identified him as a radical extremist. 65% of Americans said that they would not get behind this, the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement because they said that he was extreme, because he was saying, we need to get civil rights now, now, now. And they said, hold on, you're being fast about this, we're working on it, we're getting there. And now what is the case? Now MLK is galvanized as a hero, national holidays, schools named after him, streets. We all love MLK, but we didn't all love MLK. And in the same way that a lot of people critique the activists and organizers of today, the social justice organizers of today, and sometimes Sometimes people don't say it out loud, and I know there's some folks in the room that sometimes don't say this out loud when they're just like, oh, it's too extreme, it's a lot. It's too much, calm it down. It's the same thing that they were saying about MLK. We can only see in hindsight what was necessary. You understand? Oftentimes we can only see in hindsight what was necessary. But back then, he was seen as doing a lot for the time. And a lot of people think that Black Lives Matter, that does too much. You're talking about prison reform. You sound anti-police for critiquing the fact that policing systems actually maintain a cultural code that makes it so that they cannot hold themselves accountable, even when there is malpractice. Is that extreme or is that honest? Is it extreme or is it just uncomfortably honest? Right. Right. So MLK said, I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. Notice he didn't say the white liberal, not the white conservative, he said the white moderate. Yes?
Excuse me, are these the words of Martin Luther King?
Yes. Yes, he wrote this, actually, thank you for interjecting. He wrote this from the Birmingham jail cell. Some of you have heard of the letter from Birmingham jail. You understand that a lot of his work was done in Birmingham, Alabama. This was in 1963, if I'm not mistaken. And he was in a jail cell when he wrote this because he was arrested for engaging in some type of civil disobedience, right? Some type of march, some type of boycott, some type of something. So he's in jail and he writes this to his peers that are supposed to be on his side. They're supposed to be standing in unity with him and advancing justice. He's talking to his colleagues, because he also is a clergyman. You understand, he was a reverend. So he says, my Christian and Jewish brothers, first I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. When I first read this, when I was in undergrad, I was like, oh, yes, King, yes. I mean, it is actually more frustrating when you have somebody that kind of sort of gets it and is supposed to be an ally-ish, but doesn't really want to look at it plainly and deal with it properly, than it is when you have somebody all the way on the other side, because then at least you understand what you're working with there. You're not confused about that. You see, but when you have people that claim to be, advancing, yeah, we want justice too, we're allies in the movement, but are unwilling to take a proper, serious stance, that are unwilling to do the necessary work of communicating with their community members, activating themselves, figuring out how to leverage their resources, how to leverage their privilege to combat the very systems that they privilege from, that's when we're talking about allyship. Not just saying, oh, I'm not racist. Are you an anti-racist? Are you an anti-racist? Not just saying, oh, I'm not sexist. Are you an anti-sexist? Do you leverage your privilege in order to combat the very system that you privilege from? And I'm going to talk about privilege because before I move forward, a lot of people are confused about that. This talk of privilege is, I'm not sure, right? Like, white people go through struggle. It's true. White people go through struggle. Males go through struggle. So all this talk about feminism.
Well, it's not the same.
What?
You're a man or a woman.
Oh, okay. Well, I like your dress. That's cute. Sorry, I had to say that. Males go through struggle, right? Even people with money go through struggles. So what is all of this talk about privilege? What if I pretended in this day, I'm a white male with access and privilege, and I say, stop. Like, my father was an alcoholic. I went through struggle too. I had to work hard in college. Stop telling me that I have privilege. Y'all are crazy. And then I respond to them in my black woman self, and I say, well, interestingly enough, I understand that you've been through struggle, Mr. Person. But privilege is not what you've gone through. Privilege is what you know that you will never have to go through because of your particular identity. What you know that you will never have to go through. So knowing that this didn't happen to you because, you're a person of color, or this happened to you because you're a woman. How many times have I had to wonder, I wonder if that happened because, or known that it happened to me because I'm black, or known that it happened to me because I'm woman, or known that it happened to me because I'm both. So this whole conversation around privilege gets really misused and confused about I struggle too. Having privilege doesn't mean that you never struggle. It means that you will not have to struggle for the same reasons that other people have to struggle because of the vulnerabilities that they are experiencing under any given systems. Colorblind. I'm colorblind, I don't see color. You're avoiding it. I understand that it comes from a good place. I understand that it comes from a positive intention. I don't see color. But if you don't see color, then you don't see the repercussions of being any particular color, which causes a vulnerability in any given society. So in order to remedy race, we would like to ignore it, but you cannot remedy anything by ignoring it. You actually look at it head on, you look at what it does, you look at the systems that inform it, and then you address them. You don't ignore them or avoid them. So I'm somebody that understands intention. I understand that people can have positive intention when they say, I treat everybody equally, I don't like to look at division, I love people, period. But we also have to understand that there can be damage in treating people the very same that historically have not been treated the same. Part of leveling the playing field is acknowledging the fact that not every group has been treated the same equally. And when you say that you're colorblind, you're avoiding the very real structural realities that color causes. Still with me? We spoke about Eric Garner already. Eric Garner, I don't have to go into the details. If you all didn't know, this is what Eric Garner looked like. Brother Hawk mentioned that he was a big man. And Eric Garner was selling the loose cigarettes, and the officers that oftentimes approached him in New York, approached him on that very day, and he said, and Eric Garner immediately kind of put his hands up, and I'm not going to show the video because I'm just not even going to re-traumatize us like that. For what reason? Some of you have seen the video. Raise your hand if you saw the video, that particular video. It's stressful. You remember, yeah. Okay. So he puts his hand up and he says, y'all always messing with me. Like, leave me be. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not hurting anyone. And then, of course, he is approached by the officers. He's taken down by the officers. He's then face down on the ground. His hand is put behind his back, and then immediately the urgency in his voice picks up, and he starts to say, I can't breathe. And he says it repeatedly over and over again, and the person who took the video is telling the officers, can't you hear him saying he can't breathe? You're gonna kill him, right? And then they continue to proceed, and before you know it, he is choked to death after saying at least 11 times that he couldn't breathe, right? And this was the way in which he was engaged after selling loose cigarettes in front of a store shop where the store owner actually knew who he was and was friends with him and didn't have a problem with him being there. You still with me? Yes.
I was just going to say that if you look at his resist to the arrest, he was more or less like waving his fingers at them, saying, why are you all doing this?
Yeah.
It wasn't like he was attacking
No,
them.
there was,
like,
yeah.
So you look at the excess of force,
yeah.
and this thing that was defined as not a chokehold, that was classified as not a chokehold.
What is it? What could it,
You know,
what could it possibly be? So yeah, so I think for a lot of people it's easy to say, well, he shouldn't have even done anything. He shouldn't have even lifted his hands, or he shouldn't have waved his fingers. People do that when they're frustrated. Is it warranting of death? You know, and so, I mean, if I could tell you all of the footage and in real life experience that I've seen where like white-skinned people have like, you know, disrespected officers and nothing happened, and them not being put in a chokehold, or even them just being like, get off me, don't touch me. You understand? And then nothing happened. But then for him to be like, y'all always messing with me, and for that to end in his life being over. And so then, do we know this person? We do. Bear with me. Dylan Roof. Dylan Roof shot 12? No, killed 12 black people, and then there was a number of other people that were injured. It was a white supremacist attack at a Charleston church, and he went in there with the intention to start a race war. He went in there with a very clear and strategic plan. Of course, the officers went and looked into his files later on to figure out what was causing, why he did this attack. And he was trying to do something that would start a race war. That was his intention behind it. So he goes in there, but this is not even the reason why I'm mentioning this. He goes in there, he kills 12 black people, injures many more black people that were praying of the Christian church. They were praying on their knees. And so he goes in there, shoots them, and walks right out. Goes home, I believe. And then when the officers find him, of course they need to take him in. He's engaged in a heinous crime. But what happens immediately upon their arrival? They don't shoot him, or you know, he needs to get equal access to justice. What happened? They put a bulletproof vest over his body to make sure that his body was safe from making sure that nobody would take out some type of extrajudicial justice. You understand, that nobody would snipe him or anything like that. So they put a bulletproof vest over him. Why? So that he can get equal access to the law. As an American citizen, he needs equal access to the law because that's his right. That's his civil right. So we have to take him to the court so that the court can talk to him, not so that he can be, you know, killed on the street. So they protect his body. And then what happens? He says, I'm hungry. And they take him to Burger King to go get Burger King before they take him in. This, that. This, that. Are we exaggerating when we say Black Lives Matter? No. No, we're not. But why do people combat it with all lives matter? Yeah. Why do people do that? I want to offer you something from a place of love. Let me bring my energy back. Let's bring my energy back. I want to offer you something. So, a firefighter is called because they have to come do their duty. And the firefighter goes in his red truck and he goes over to the community that is has a fire in one of the houses. And in essence, the firefighter gets his hose and pulls it out, and the community is frantic. There's a house here that's on fire. There's a house here that's not on fire. And he proceeds to get his hose and pour his water on the house that is not on fire. That is not on fire, right? And then the community says to him, what are you doing? What's happening? And he smugly turns back to the community members and says, all houses matter. He is putting his attention on the house that does not need the attention because it is not under the vulnerability of fire. You still with me? You understand? It's an avoidance. It's an avoidance. We do all matter, but we can't all matter until we look at what's going on.
Sorry for no to cut in there. The way that I expressed this to somebody was that all lives matter is urgent. In terms of time management, is urgent. Is important, but Black Lives Matter is urgent and important.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I mean? They're
Yes.
important, but not urgent. So,
That's right.
So we need,
Yes, important versus urgent,
yes,
right?
so
And so, of course, we all matter. Who in their right mind would assert that we don't all matter? But of course, we understand the concept of urgency. And so we shouldn't avoid. So what is meritocracy? I want to address this briefly. Oh, you want to answer for me? No, somebody raised their hand that they wanted to answer the, yes.
I mean, I just want to quote Baha'u'llah,
Okay.
that he says, be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age you live in and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I want to go through this quickly. Where are we on time? I've been talking for a long time already. Are we okay on time? Y'all still with me in here? We together? We here? Okay. What is meritocracy? Let's go through this quickly. Meritocracy is a system in which the talented are chosen and move ahead on the basis of their achievement only. So that would be the best type of system to live in, right? Where like you move ahead based on your achievement, your talent, your merit. Another definition would be a system in which progress is based on ability and talent rather than class privilege or wealth or race or gender or what have you. That's where we want to get, where there's equal opportunity so people can really just go based off of not their identity, but based off of their ability. Or I don't want to be ableist when I say that, but you understand what I'm saying. So The Guardian, I think The Guardian is based in UK. They reached out to me and they asked me to write an article on inequality. And that's very broad, so I was like, okay, I'll gather something up. But I thought I'm gonna talk about meritocracy because a lot of people believe that we do live in a purely meritocratic society. Now, merit matters. Talent, will, drive, willingness to work hard matters. I know this for a fact. Is it the only thing that functions in our ability to succeed? Absolutely not. Okay, so the myth of meritocracy in the era of Black Lives Matter. And it says, an original member of Black Lives Matter says the movement has played a key role in highlighting how race, gender, sexuality, and class oppression intersect. Now, I will elaborate on this. Inequality is so often, now bear with me, I know this is a lot of words, but I want us to see this together. Inequality is so often misunderstood as an outgrowth of cultural deficiency, meaning it is the people's culture. That is why they're not doing well. That's not why they're not socioeconomically being mobile, is because their culture is deficient. This is the cultural deficiency theory. But contrary to popular belief, which pervades the left, right, and the moderate political spectrum, right, popular belief, we do not live under a meritocracy. Inequality is not the result of the superior and inferior work ethics of a society's inhabitants. Still with me? Okay. Some point to the cultural shortcomings of groups that remain socioeconomically immobile in order to advance the accountability narrative. What is the accountability narrative? This way of thinking presumes that these groups should stop blaming the system and take accountability for their collective condition. Stop blaming the system, just work hard. I don't want to hear anything about the system and racism anymore. We had Barack Obama, stop complaining. You understand? The whole ordeal. In the United States, for the most part, it asserts that our institutions and social systems are unbiased, and that if one works hard, one is able to succeed. Employers, or people that use this narrative, lean on the significance of bad behaviors to explain stifled advancement. Okay? Yep? No? Okay. Thought we had a thought over there. Okay. All right. This is the last thought I want to share, but this is kind of wrapping up the point, not the last thought in the presentation, I got more, but the last thought in this thought, but stay with me. Okay, so for example, cultural deficiency theorists that believe in the cultural deficiency and not systematic inequality might assert that the reason Black people are disproportionately represented in United States prisons at exceedingly high degrees is because Black people are committing crimes at disproportionately high rates. So this would be the necessary assumption, right? Like they're just committing crimes more, that's why they're in jail more, obviously. But a more productive assessment of this phenomenon would include an analysis and critique of hyperpolicing in Black communities. What do I mean by this? If Javon in my hood is engaging in a crime and there's a whole bunch of police there to see it, where's Javon going? To jail. If Bill in Westwood on the other side of town, where UCLA is, where I studied, engages in that very same crime and there are no police there to see him, guess where he's going? To college. You understand? Okay. The legacy of the war on crime and the war on drugs in the development of the contemporary carceral state, you had Bill Clinton literally apologize for the fact that like you had this mass influx of the hyperpolicing during this war on drugs, when you really should have been sending these people that were, for some of them, suffering from drug addiction to go get help for their health condition, since addiction is a health condition. That's why you have masses of people that are sick and mentally ill swimming in prisons, because we don't know what to do with them, because we don't have proper mental health facilities. You understand where I'm going. And so the war on crime, the war on drugs, literally just taking masses of Black and brown people out of their communities, throwing them in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. Now weed is so legal everywhere, and you have people that are still having records because they sold or used weed, these nonviolent drug offenses, and it has not been expunged from their record. And this actually affects their ability to move forward in life. So now you can go get weed from like a drive-through like it's French fries at McDonald's. Like that's how easy weed is now. So what happens to all of the people that suffered grave consequences because of your racist war on drugs? What are you gonna do about that? Say you're sorry? That's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. In the development of the contemporary carceral state, which just means prison state, and the continued hyper-sentencing of Black people. I'm gonna wrap this up. Decades of research have shown, not Funmilola's opinion, decades of research have shown, I don't do opinion, let's do research. I'm a social scientist, just like many of you in this room, right? We're looking at logic, we're looking at research. Decades of research have shown that criminal courts sentence Black defendants more harshly than their white counterparts. More recent studies have shown it is not uncommon for Black defendants to be given twice the prison terms of white people with identical criminal histories when they commit the same crime under identical circumstances. Are you with me? And what is that? Does that mean that the judge is just like a raging racist? Not necessarily. Sometimes maybe, but not necessarily. It's implicit bias. Our dear one, Tiffany, broke down what that is, implicit bias. Where people don't know that they're engaging in bias because they've consumed information, media, experience throughout their entire lives that has not made them acknowledge the way in which there's racialized phenomenon that inform how we look at white people, Black people, brown people, Asian people differently in this world, right? And I could go, if somebody reminds me later, I can go into how and why and media around that, but I'll skip it for right now. So yes, we created Black Lives Matter 5.5, 6 years ago now to address a lot of these issues. Police brutality is one iteration. Incarceration is another iteration. The judicial system needs fixing, and also culturally. Oh, I'm super over time?
Well, I am mindful, but I think there may be a lot of questions.
Oh.
If you don't mind, can we open up the floor?
Sure.
We have 10 minutes.
Yes, because I think I'm like done anyway. I'm done. Oh, okay, yes. Okay, we have 10 minutes? Okay. Oh, I'm just gonna wrap up. So, I'm to finish. I'm almost done. So, Black Lives Matter happened. We did that, for sure. Trayvon Martin was the impetus behind it. Trayvon Martin is not the only one. Trayvon Martin is just one. There's a lot of cases. And Trayvon Martin was the impetus behind it. And we know a lot of the families of the people that have been killed, extrajudicial violence in the United States. And it's not just in the States, it happens elsewhere as well. And you know that it's a problem here as well, and not just in the States. This is the first banners for Black Lives Matter. And as you can see here, it says hashtag J4TMLA, Justice for Trayvon Martin, Los Angeles. On the top of it, it says hashtag Black Lives Matter. This was 6 years ago. We could have never imagined that what came of it would have came of it. That's at the Cal State LA Pan-African Studies Department where I teach, and we hung the banner up as almost like an homage to the beginning of the movement, if you will. And then on the other end, it has some of our demands from that rally, that protest. Lastly, normalize activism. I am not special. I am not to be clapped for. I am not uniquely amazing. And sometimes people are just like, no, girl, you good, you did that, you dope. And I'm like, I'm normal. Like I was a normal kid, a normal high school student who just really early on in my life was like trying to figure out the language to explain what I knew to be true. And finally, when I got into college, I got the language. And when I went to grad school, I kind of, refined that language. Normalize activism. Do not make it something that it always has to be clapped for. If all of us are actors and all of us feel compelled to do whatever is necessary within our own capacity, then activists are no longer exceptional. It becomes normal for all of us to feel compelled to do our part. Now, when we clap for the people that do the good thing, we excuse ourselves from doing it because they'll handle it. We are the ones we've been looking for. We truly are the ones we've been looking for. Nobody is coming. Nobody is coming to do it. I promise you, nobody's coming. Nobody's coming. It's up to us, you know? So we have to normalize activism. Activism looks like many things. This is a 1 minute long. Activism looks like many things. This is my artwork. It's part of my activism. Yes, I teach. Yes, I organize. Yes, I speak places and things like that. But my artwork is very important, and I performed a bit of this. Oops, we don't have any audio. Might not be able to play it.
If you turn up the volume, you should. Oh, no, give us 2 seconds.
For those of you that were at the creative night, I did the longer version of this, but this is the kind of just brief 1 minute version to give people an idea of what it is. Let's take a look at it.
Give it a second.
Who's woke? You woke? Me? I've been woke. Stays woke. Let me rewind. Some of y'all not hearing what I'm talking about. Woke. W-O-K-E. Adjective. Definition. Aware. Knowledgeable about what's happening in your communities and in the world, with the ability and willingness to assess and critique how social, political, and economic systems of oppression operate at macro and micro levels. I met a black man and he seemed real woke. An ankh around his neck, a scent of Nag Champa smoke, he said, "Queen, sister, mother of the earth, black girl, let me treat you like goddess. Gender binaries are an illusion and patriarchy is a crook. It is our duty to fight, like it is our duty to win, like have to do better at keeping each other in check. We kill each other, then focus our attention on police. Who's really woke?"
Thank you for your talk, very inspiring. One thing that I was wondering while you were telling me, I'm from the Netherlands, looking at the big America. Anyway, that's what was told us. If you want to fulfill your dreams, you go to America.
Right.
And you can become anything you want.
Right.
And there is a lot of big stories to confirm that, and we are supposed to believe them all. I've not always been a very good believer, but I always had the feeling that America was reasonably okay. But as life progresses and you start to learn more about it, you see that there's a lot of social injustice. Becoming a Baha'i means that you say, okay, every civilian, every person on earth travels the same road to unity in the world. How do you see, you use the word which is hard for me to pronounce, meritocracy, and a non-meritocracy,
Yes.
like it is in the US.
Yes.
US is a leading country for image, for people
That's
to
right.
dream about all over the world.
Yes.
Go to America and you're going to make it.
Yeah.
How do you think America's identity can be changed, being one of the big leading countries, so it can help repair the unity of the world?
Yes.
Because to me, I mean, okay, they say the Chinese are coming as well, so I don't know if that's an example, but one way or another, we're trying to get there, to
Yes.
get a united world.
Yes.
Do you understand my question?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So tell the truth. America will be able to transform not only its image, but its institutions when it tells the truth. America is deeply invested in its image, and that is why you believed that it was the land of the free and the home of the brave. That's why, because the image has been so pristinely polished to present the idea of meritocracy. You come here, you work hard, you'll make it. What does that mean for the, black or brown child, or even let's say an impoverished white child? Let's be clear about all of the different identities that exist. For lack of a better term, in an inner city school that is overcrowded with a teacher that is overwhelmed, it is under-resourced, underfunded, and the assumption is that they're gonna be able to get equal access to the educational opportunities that will allow for them to thrive socially and economically as their peer on the West Side with all of the resources, all of the SAT tutors, all of the ACT tutors, right? So like what we're trying to create is equal opportunity. And so America is unwilling to engage the reality of its history because we need to look pristine and polished so that we can assume that it's the land of the free and the home of the brave. In order to say that you love a country, you have to be willing to tell the truth about it. You have, people say that when you critique a country and that when you protest and that when you look at the country in its face and you say, tell the truth. If you really are land of the free, home of the brave, equal access to opportunity, then be that. And if I love you, I have to tell you the truth about who you are. They say that you're being unpatriotic when you're critical. But if I love you, I don't lie to the people that I love. The people that I love know. I'll be like, listen, get your life together, right? And that's how I show love. And I mean, if we had time, I would break down this whole conversation about emotional intelligence, but we don't. So y'all talk to me later. We can talk about emotional intelligence. It's important. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Got the mic. I wanted to remind some of the Baha'is here that perhaps you guys remember that Abdul Baha calls the black people the pupil of the eye.
Interesting.
And I feel like this is somehow extremely significant for us that because, well, with the pupil, we're able to see what is happening in different areas. And I feel that, of course, Baha'is are everywhere extremely concerned with all matters concerning justice, social justice.
Yes.
And it is something that's very close to our heart that we're able to listen and hear what people have to say, to receive the information that the pupil of the eye will be seeing. Just recently I heard of a research where they found that media coverage on traumatic, or media coverage on like bad news, like wars and things like this, causes higher levels of anxiety in the people who view it, higher than the people who experience it.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm hearing where you're going. Yes.
Yes.
This is why we avoid the news sometimes, because it just feels so helpless. And it feels even worse if we feel like there is so much drama, trauma, and devastation happening, and then we feel guilty for not doing anything about it. But better than feeling guilty for not doing anything is to monitor the way that you consume your news, monitor the way that you consume your social media, and make sure that you are going in, and I mean, this is just my own personal preference. I go into news and social media with the intention, like, I'm going to see what's happening in the world, and I also don't have to consume it in my body. I can know in my mind, I don't have to eat it. That you don't have to eat the devastation of the world, but that you can look at it and figure out how you can offer your part. Small note, the UN talk was wonderful. I don't know if the people that were, yes, the UN talk was wonderful. I'm thinking about global politics, because we have spoken a lot about America. The UN is a world body. I was recently on a panel where we did a talk about the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. When they asked me to come talk about it, I was like, this is not my area of expertise, I'm not quite sure, but I am very deeply invested in world politics, a lot to do with West Africa. A lot of people talk about corruption in West Africa, corruption in Nigeria, and what have you. And I was talking on the panel about the way in which we can have more nuanced and complex conversations about race, gender, class, climate, all of these things, that like we are capable of multitasking. That you don't have to choose one justice issue and say, that's all I'm gonna think about in my life, and I'm not gonna look at all the rest of them. Like, Intersectionality is a hot button term in social justice. It's about looking at multiple different phenomena at the same time and knowing that they all can be engaged at the same time if we're willing to do that work.
Thank you so much. Just another thing that the Baha'i sometimes forget, that we're not ever allowed to be angry except about injustice.
Interesting. Is that right? Is that it? Okay, only angry about injustice. Okay, I'm learning. I didn't know about Baha'i until recently. I'm learning. Okay, I'm learning. I've learned so much in the past few days. I'm just like, okay, Baha'i, I see you. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a question. I'm not a particularly gregarious person. I'm shy and quiet.
Yeah.
But and I'm not American. And I don't want to be complicit in my privilege.
Yeah.
And I want to work towards contributing to solving this injustice. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations, like how I can become like an ally.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Study so that you know, so that I know a lot of white people that know the deep intricacies about racial injustice and gender injustice, and they don't always have to come and say, explain this to me. And honestly, it's okay to ask questions and ask for explanation. I don't want to make that seem like a negative thing, but it's really powerful when people, especially people with some level of social privilege, take it upon themselves to say, I will take the first move of educating myself. And then the second thing is, after you're educated about the issue, seeing what organizations are doing work that you could possibly be helpful in, and instead of just showing up and saying, hey, I'm a person, I want to help, that's good too, but honestly, we are allowed to live happy and fulfilled lives. I am a joyful person. People think that activism is you have to give up your happiness and be devastated all the time. I'm very happy. I love people, I love life. Listen, y'all, I love life, but I'm also deeply invested in the devastation of the world. But what did I do to answer your question, what did I do when I wanted to start being more fruitful in my efforts toward helping was taking what I'm good at and then offering that to the movement. Take what you're good at and then offer it. If you know how to edit videos, we need video editors. If you know how to make graphics, we need to make graphics to send people to come to this particular meeting, rally, engagement, whatever it may be. If you know how to write a poem, write a poem. My poem traveled and I didn't know that it would do what it was gonna do. And massive amounts of people have come to me and said, you don't understand, this is what I needed to hear. And I'm like, I just kind of wrote a poem, I don't know. But it helps, do what you're good at. People say, well, where do I start? Educate yourself. Do what you're good at, offer it to an organization, or start your own efforts. But don't just say, thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers are good now. Thoughts and prayers are good. But don't let it be the only action.
This needs to be our last.
Okay, sure. Mm-hmm.
No, here, I'll catch up with you later, but somebody here,
Okay,
we'll get more
okay.
to that question than I
We gonna talk anyway.
Yeah, we'll talk.
It's okay. There's plenty of time if you love.
Intersectionality,
Yes.
right? I think Porter is saying that intersectionality is infected with this Jim Crowism, right? Because we'll go to immigrants' rights,
Yes.
which I'm all for.
Yes.
We'll go and fight another battle, right? We'll fight against xenophobia, right? And we jump from issue to issue. And when you have a women's march, there's millions of women in the street.
Yes.
You have an immigrants' march, there's millions of people. But when we're doing something for Trayvon on his anniversary, or Eric Garner's case is still going on, those same people who are like, yes, intersectionality, who are at the women's march holding up in racism posters, they never show up for black people.
That's a good
They
assertion.
don't show up. So it breaks my heart.
Yes.
And how do we get the Jim Crow out of intersectionality? Oh, I'm sorry, Jim Crow. Jim Crow is a policy in the South, in America, which kept black people as second-class citizens. You cannot use the same bathroom as us. You cannot ride on the front of the bus. It was as systemic as it gets, right? So when I say Jim Crow in politics, when I say Jim Crow in intersectionality, it means everybody first, black people last. And so it's wait, we'll get back to you. So how do we protect from that?
Yes. So when you have like a women's march, for instance, and you have different people of different backgrounds, you all knew what the women's march was in the States. It was very large demonstration, really for women's rights and to advocate for women's rights in general. And so you have the galvanizing of all communities, immigrants, people of color, everybody come together, Muslims and non-Muslims and Christians and not everybody come together and let us advance a narrative that is for advocating for women's rights. Now, we want to galvanize everybody across intersections and everybody can come. But when it comes to literally blatantly anti-black state violence, and people not showing up, or only like a handful of black people showing up, but not the masses of amounts of people that show up when we talk about immigrants' rights and women's rights and what have you, it becomes a question of why are you so uncomfortable with putting your face on a conversation about combating anti-black racism? Like, people are still highly uncomfortable with it. You would think that people would be uncomfortable with kind of talking about feminism and combating patriarchy, but people are more willing to like say, yeah, like I'm advancing women's rights. Maybe they won't call themselves a feminist, but I'm advancing women's rights. Like, yes, I am for immigration, and we have to treat immigrants properly, and we shouldn't misuse them, misabuse them, and what have you. But when it comes to anti-black state violence, number one, a lot of people feel like, why are we doing that? Because they feel like maybe we're exaggerating because we have had Barack Obama and there has been so much representative racial progress. On TV, you will see black people with money and bling and ballin' and all of these other things. The assumption is that like anti-black racism must not be that bad if you have all of these black people that are succeeding and doing well. Just because a few people make it out the system doesn't mean that a system is actually functional. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so, number one, a lot of people kind of hesitate to put their name and their face on that. And number two, a lot of people think that this movement, this iteration of this movement against the kind of anti-black state violence, they don't want to be affiliated with being like anti-police or anti-the state or anti-government or terrorist. Do you know that Black Lives Matter was put on a list of black identity extremists? What are you saying? Because we are acknowledging the fact that black people suffer from vulnerabilities under a system that is highly racialized and discriminatory, that makes us extremists in the same way that MLK was an extremist, right? Come on, you know what I mean? Like, let us use our senses. We're a family, you understand. And so I think we're done here. No? One more? Okay.
And also that the system profits from the dysfunction and the oppression.
Watch the 13th documentary.
Everybody should watch the documentary 13th.
Yeah, private prisons.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I suppose from a Baha'i perspective, the first thing that drew me to the Baha'i faith, apart from the oneness of humanity, was this principle of the independent search after truth. Yes. Right? That is, not only do you think with your own mind and question things that are in front of you, but you become detached from your own comforts in order to pursue the truth. Right? Yes. That's giving up privilege. Yes. Right? And like you're saying, if you want to go and serve in the black community or do something, we've got Google. You know, we can learn and we can, you know, and the thing is, on social media, you know, there's so much covered up, but we do need to question the narratives that are out there. For example, with Standing Rock, none of the media covered it.
That's true.
But if you tuned into it, I was very close to it, and a guy called Digital Smoke Signals had a drone putting out the videos, and we were dispersing them. So if you're tuned into it and you have an intent to know what's really going on and want to figure out how you can serve it, it's there for you. You can find it. So it is a thing of us questioning or independently investigating the truth.
Absolutely, and that's why, as you were speaking, I shifted it over. I'm not going to talk about it, but that's part of emotional intelligence, which if y'all want to talk about it, we can talk about it later. But around Knowing when you are having to deal with yourself and your own discomfort in your personal pursuit of truth. If you come across a logic that challenges the logic that you have held for your entire life, be willing and fluid and honest and open enough to shift. That is the mark of somebody who is really advancing justice, not staying in their comfort zone because that's what they know and they know how to present that argument. So that's part of emotional intelligence, is being accountable for yourself, and also knowing when you've done the wrong thing or when you've contributed to a harm and being willing to take accountability for that.